Let's dive into a story that starts with a simple, almost funny problem and turns into absolute terror. Imagine this. You wake up one morning, and your nightstand is just a little to the left of where you left it. Weird, right? But you brush it off. Maybe you bumped it in your sleep. But for Emily and Mark, it didn't stop there. The next day, the entire dresser was a foot closer to the window. The heavy, ornate mirror above it was tilted at a strange new angle. It kept happening, night after night. Their bedroom furniture seemed to have a life of its own, subtly rearranging itself while they slept. At first, they joked about it. Mark accused Emily of redecorating in her sleep. Emily blamed Mark for playing a prank. The joke stopped when they both woke up one morning with their feet pressed against the footboard of the bed. The bed itself had moved a solid 3 feet across the room, pinning them against the wall. That's when the laughter died, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. They weren't just bumping into things anymore. Something was actively moving heavy furniture. Their first logical thought? Sleepwalking. It was the only explanation that made any sense, so they decided to get proof. They bought a small night vision camera and set it up on a bookshelf in the corner, aimed to capture the entire room. They went to bed that night feeling a little silly, but also anxious to finally solve the mystery. The next morning, everything was normal. The bed was where it should be. The dresser was in its place. A wave of relief washed over them. Maybe setting up the camera had scared off the ghost, or maybe it was all in their heads. Eagerly, they took the camera and plugged it into their laptop to watch the footage. They hit play, fast-forwarding through the first few hours of stillness. The timestamp hit 2:13 a.m., and then they saw it. It wasn't the furniture. The furniture was perfectly still. On the screen, they watched in stunned silence as the wall behind their bed began to ripple. It wasn't a trick of the light. The wall itself seemed to breathe, to stretch and warp like fabric. The ceiling lowered by a few inches, then rose again. The floorboards subtly shifted, not making a sound. It was the room. The entire room was changing shape around them as they slept, and in doing so, it was pushing and pulling the furniture with it. They replayed the clip again and again, their disbelief turning to sheer panic. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't sleepwalking. Their house, or at least their bedroom, was alive, and it was playing with them. The realization hit them like a physical blow. All those nights, the house wasn't just moving things. It was rearranging itself, testing its boundaries, shifting its form around their sleeping bodies. It felt like being inside the stomach of some great sleeping beast. Driven by a new, more primal fear, they set the camera up again the next night. They barely slept, lying awake in the dark, listening for any sound, any creak that was out of the ordinary. They felt like prisoners, waiting for the walls to close in. The morning came, and a horrifying new change awaited them. The window was smaller. The ceiling felt lower. The room was more cramped, more claustrophobic. They scrambled for the camera, their hands trembling as they pulled out the memory card. They didn't even bother leaving the room. They huddled on the bed and watched the new footage on their laptop. The video showed the same terrifying phenomenon, but it was more aggressive this time. The walls didn't just ripple, they actively compressed, shrinking the space. It was like the house was preparing itself for something, molding the room around them. They watched, frozen in horror, as the footage neared the end of the night. On the screen, the wall with the bedroom door began to warp. The wooden frame of the door stretched and twisted, the doorknob melting into the surface. Slowly, silently, the entire doorway was absorbed into the wall, the wood grain smoothing over until it was just a solid, seamless surface. Emily and Mark looked up from the laptop, their eyes wide with terror. They slowly turned their heads toward the door. It wasn't there. Where their only exit had been just hours before, there was now a solid, uninterrupted wall. They were trapped. The camera, still recording from its corner, captured the final shot. 2 people in a room with no doors, a room that was still, ever so slowly, closing in. Let me know in the comments what you would do in that situation. Until next time, stay safe. Let's delve into a story that's been circulating on online forums, a spooky tale that blurs the line between a marketing gimmick and a real-life horror story. It's about a realtor named Claire, and what many are calling her final terrifying live stream. Claire was a seasoned real estate agent, known for her engaging virtual tours. She had a knack for making any property feel like a dream home. So when she was hired to sell a sprawling old countryside estate, she decided a live stream was the perfect way to showcase its unique charm. This house was a time capsule. It had been vacant for over 2 decades, yet everything inside seemed frozen in time. The furniture was draped in clean white sheets. Fresh-looking flowers sat on the kitchen counter, and a faint sweet scent lingered in the air, like old perfume. She started the stream with her usual upbeat energy. "Hello, everyone. Welcome to the magnificent Blackwood Manor. You are not going to believe the character this place has." As she moved through the grand entryway and into the living room, her chat started to buzz with activity, but not with questions about the property. Comments started flooding in. "Who's that behind you, Claire? And there's a guy in the hallway." Claire just chuckled, used to online trolls trying to derail her streams. "Very funny, guys," she said, panning the camera around dramatically. "As you can see, I'm all alone here. Plenty of room for you and your family." But as she continued the tour, she couldn't shake a growing unease. The air grew noticeably colder, and she started hearing something, a soft sound, like footsteps on old floorboards, echoing her own but always half a second behind. She tried to ignore it, focusing on the beautiful vintage details of the house, but the viewers were relentless. "He's getting closer," one comment read. "In the dining room doorway," another typed. She kept laughing it off, but her voice was starting to sound a little strained. After ending the stream, promising to answer all property-related questions later, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Curiosity got the better of her, and she replayed the live stream. Her blood ran cold. The viewers weren't trolling. In several frames just at the edge of the camera's view was a tall, dark figure, standing perfectly still. Whenever she had turned the camera toward it, the footage would glitch and distort for a split second before the figure was gone. Determined to debunk it as a trick of the light or a technical glitch, Claire announced she was going back the next evening. "We're going to solve this mystery together," she told her followers. The moment she went live from the house again, the chat exploded. "It's not behind you anymore, Claire. It's in front of you. Look at the top of the stairs." She stared into the empty space ahead, her eyes wide. "Guys, there is nothing here. I don't see anything." Her voice trembled as she walked forward, narrating the features of the grand staircase, even as her connection began to lag, her image pixelating on screen. She heard a noise from upstairs, a faint creak from the attic. "Did you guys hear that?" she whispered, her professional demeanor gone. I think I should check it out." The viewers begged her not to. "Don't go up there, Claire. End the stream and get out." But she was already ascending the narrow attic stairs, the camera shaking in her hand. The screen distorted violently, and for one terrifying split second, a pale, gaunt face appeared directly over her shoulder, looking into the camera. And then, static. The feed was dead. The live stream ended abruptly. Police later found her phone at the top of the attic stairs. The screen cracked, but still recording. When they reviewed the final moments of the footage, the last frame showed the attic door swinging shut as if pulled from the inside. Claire was never seen again. This story is a haunting reminder that some places hold secrets we aren't meant to uncover. What do you think happened to Claire? Daniel had always wanted a house with character, and the old rental just outside town certainly had plenty of it. The floorboards groaned with every step. The wind whistled through unseen cracks, and there was this peculiar echo, a whisper that seemed to trail just behind his own words. He'd call out, "Hello?" and a fraction of a second later, a faint, airy hello would drift back from the empty rooms. He chuckled the first few times, chalking it up to the house's strange acoustics. It was just one of its many quirks, like a drafty window or a sticky door. He'd even started to play with it. "Guess I'll make some coffee," he'd say aloud, and the whisper would follow. Coffee. It was his little secret, a weird but harmless feature of his new home. But then, the game changed. One evening, as he stood in the kitchen staring into the fridge, thinking about what to make for dinner, The whisper beat him to it. He hadn't said a word, just had a fleeting thought of spaghetti. And from the hallway, clear as day, came the echo. Spaghetti. Daniel froze, a carton of milk clutched in his hand. He hadn't spoken. He was sure of it. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe he'd mumbled without realizing. He shook his head, trying to clear it. He walked into the living room, his heart starting to thump a little faster. He thought deliberately this time, maybe I'm just tired. And from the corner of the room, the whisper replied, tired. A cold dread began to seep into his bones, far colder than the house's usual draft. This wasn't an echo. An echo doesn't answer your thoughts. The mimicry that had once been amusing was now deeply unsettling. The voice was his, but it wasn't him. It was a perfect, chilling copy. He spent the next few days in a state of high alert, his own mind a minefield. Every stray thought felt like a liability, a potential conversation with the unseen resident of his home. He'd think, I need to get out of here. And the house would whisper back from the shadows, out of here. It was taunting him, playing with him. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a disembodied presence that knew his every intention. One night, the fear gave way to a desperate need for answers. He had to know where it was coming from. Standing in the middle of the living room, he spoke into the silence, his voice trembling slightly. Where are you? He waited, holding his breath. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy, and then it came. Not from the walls or the ceiling, but from directly beneath his feet, a muffled yet unmistakable whisper. Where are you? It was coming from under the floorboards. His blood ran cold. The source wasn't an acoustic trick. It was something in the house, something trapped or waiting. With trembling hands, he found a crowbar in the shed. The old wood groaned in protest as he pried at the edge of a floorboard. With each creak of the wood, the tension in the room coiled tighter. He was thinking, what am I going to find? And before the thought had even fully formed, the whisper slithered up from the growing gap in the floor. Going to find. It was anticipating him now, one step ahead of his own consciousness. He worked faster, sweat beading on his forehead, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Finally, the board gave way with a loud crack, revealing a dark, musty crawlspace below. He peered into the blackness, his phone's flashlight beam cutting through the dust motes. And as he knelt down, ready to call out, ready to demand what it was, a voice rose from the darkness below. It was his own voice, clear and possessive, finishing a thought he hadn't even begun. It whispered, "You're home now." Moving into a new house is supposed to be a fresh start, right? For the Ramirez family, it was a dream come true, a beautiful old colonial home with character and history. Every door swung open with a welcoming creak, revealing sunlit rooms and endless possibilities. Every door, that is, except one. Tucked away at the very end of the upstairs hallway, it stood stubbornly shut, a silent anomaly in their new life. When Miguel Ramirez and his wife asked the realtor about it, she just waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, that's just an old sealed storage space," she'd said with a practiced smile. "Very common in houses of this age, probably full of dust and nothing more." But something about her explanation didn't sit right with the family. It felt too easy, too quick. The real unease began at night. That's when they'd hear a faint, rhythmic knocking coming from behind the locked door. Tap, tap, tap. It was slow, deliberate, and would stop the very second anyone got close to the hallway to investigate. At first, they blamed it on the house settling. Old pipes, anything to explain away the growing dread. But the sound was too precise, too intentional. After a few sleepless nights, Miguel had had enough. Armed with a power drill, he decided to force the issue. The lock was old and stubborn, but it finally gave way with a loud crack. He pushed the door open, but was met with a wall of absolute darkness. It was a blackness so complete, it seemed to absorb the light from the hallway. He grabbed a flashlight, his heart pounding, and shined it inside. The beam cut through the dark, revealing a small, cramped room. But it wasn't empty. The walls, from floor to ceiling, were covered in writing. Frantic, overlapping messages scrawled into the plaster. Over and over again, the same 4 words appeared. Don't open the door again. A chill snaked down Miguel's spine, but logic, or maybe just denial, took over. It had to be a prank from a previous owner, he told himself. Shaking off the unease, he decided to reclaim the space, cleaning it out and turning it into a small, makeshift office. But working in there was suffocating. An unnatural cold clung to the room, a stark contrast to the warmth of the rest of the house. It felt like stepping into a pocket of winter that never left. That's when things started to get worse. Small objects in his new office would move. A pen left on the desk would be on the floor the next morning. A stack of papers would be inexplicably rearranged. Then, his young daughter started talking about a man. She said she'd see him standing in the hallway at night, just staring at the office door. She described him as tall and thin, like a shadow that had stretched itself out. Worried, Miguel checked the security cameras he'd installed. He scrolled through the footage and his blood ran cold. Every single night at exactly 3:12 a.m., the camera pointed at the end of the hall would flicker and die. When the feed returned just moments later, the office door was open, just a crack, but wider than it had been before. Something was pushing its way out little by little, night after night. Then came the night it all broke loose. Miguel was jolted awake by a sound he now knew intimately, but this time it was different. It wasn't a knock or a tap. It was the long, drawn-out creak of that door swinging wide open. He leaped out of bed and rushed into the hallway, his voice catching in his throat as he called out his wife's name. The air was heavy, thick, and wrong. The door to the little room was fully ajar, gaping into a void of impenetrable black. And standing at the far end of the hallway, silhouetted against the window, was his daughter. She wasn't scared. She was just pointing, her voice a chilling whisper that cut through the silence. He's out. The next morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Miguel walked cautiously to the end of the hall. The door was sealed shut again, as if it had never been opened. But something had changed. He leaned in close, his breath fogging on the wood. New words had been carved into the door, deep gouges that looked like they were made by fingernails. They read, "You shouldn't have opened it twice." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more chills. Let me know in the comments what you would have done. See you next time.